All right, before the break, we were looking at some stuff in Django, kind of repeated what we did, and then started looking at templates. We've seen several pieces, some bits and pieces of Python code. This course is covering all the software development with Python. And since both prereqs for this now use Python, we can focus more on that software development stuff and look at things like diving into the frameworks a little more. Looking the other day, we looked at Docker and building APIs, and instead of spending all our time on the language syntax. So y'all know language syntax, and we've been practicing that some. Takes practice, like any skill. We saw the pieces of Django. So we have things in a bunch of different pieces. So let's take a look at a small example of putting this together. Well, I named the thing before the break, I named it tip calculators. Not a big complicated example. So I just copied from the other page. This title. Yeah, I'm going to leave that title there. I was going to hard code the title into these pages when I copied it over, but I think I'm just going to leave it because we're going to get to where we do, I guess, sub templates soon. You know, the head section, the opening body tag, the navigation bar, the page header, those are going to be the same for everything on the site. We don't need to type them in every single one of our templates. So we'll get to that soon. That's kind of like that. So we have the title we need to pass in. We'll need to remember that. Oh, that page is done. So on the first one, actually, I do need to hard code this in because the first one, we don't actually need any data from the from Python. This is where we put the form. Okay. Form in the form, and this is where all our buttons and inputs and all that's going to be. So we don't need anything from Python. We can make a dynamic form, but this is where we get data to send to Python to process and send back to the results page. So a tip calculator. The first thing I'm putting in here is well, we really only need two numbers to figure out what the tip should be, right? How much was the meal and how good was the service? So I'll create a form with a meal price, input type equals number. I'm gonna leave value blank so that there's nothing to start with there. Step equals 0.01, that way it moves up by pennies. And the name attribute is the one we send to the server. Yes, actually, let me open the example from SF153 this afternoon, because we were looking at forms just a moment ago, and I think it's still set for the input. So here's the page, and if I type something in this, your page source. So like the first one on there is just a text input, and it has the name words for the name attribute. This way I don't have to type a bunch of stuff and set up methods to redo this. And the form goes with get method. One of the API videos talked about a whole bunch about them. We will use get in post. You use get in post pretty much 99.99999% of the time. You might use delete regularly. I don't ever use delete. I think I mentioned that before. The client can basically inform the database administrator they want something deleted. I don't give client computer delete access on the server. That's just my personal choice. So I don't need the delete method. But we'll pretty much use get and post. And the main difference between them wasn't even mentioned in either of those API videos. So if I put my name in here and go click the submit button somewhere way down here, notice at the end of the page name, it put the question mark. I like to think that as a hook. It created the URL query string. Y'all probably seen those before. If we use the get method, it shows in the URL, and the post method does not show in the URL. So when you're debugging it, you probably want to see what it is, and then switch to post whenever you release it. Once the bugs are out there. But notice the name attribute from that input box is assigned this value. And the name attribute from this input box is assigned this value. So the name attribute becomes a variable in the URL query string. So the name attribute is the one we need to send to the server. So that's the kind of the most important one. IDs and classes stay on the local machine. So that would be the normal way to access it from JavaScript or the CSS. But I usually just use the name attribute to access it all the way across because the server has to receive the name attribute. Anything else would just be a duplicate of that unique identifier. /p. Then another one, let's say service. Be an input type equals maybe a range. Yeah, let's do a range. That's a slider if you're not familiar with that particular input. Range minimum equals maybe 5, maximum equals 31. That sounds like a good range for tips. We could do floating point numbers. I've made it work before, but it's a whole lot easier to use integers and turn it to % on the other side.
Are you missing a slash on your closing paragraph tag on line 19?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right. Spider zooms in on every single separately for every single file, doesn't it? You had some white space. So a tip somewhere between 5 and 31%. Name is service. And down at this end, we'll put after that label, maybe a non-breaking space to spread that out, and we'll say lousy. Then have our slider, and up at this end, we'll say stupendous. Then we have that slider for the range of how good the service was. Or emojis would go nicely there. But I'll skip the emoji and stuff. So I give us that. One more line with input type equals submit. Whoops. And value equals submit with the capital S. Another one, input type equals reset. Value equals clear. Just to help help make sure it's clear which one is what defines what the button does and which one is words that show up on the button. Because the submit button always blends together. It almost always says submit. I guess we could make it say okay. Or calculate. That might be a good one for that. Then it won't blend together so bad. Calculate. So that gets our HTML form. So we need to load this. And well, just like before, we'll come over here, add it to our URLs. I'll call it calculate. And that'll open views.calculate tip. Oh, need a comma there. Yeah, I'll do these one at a time. So now we need to go to views and create that calculate tip method. Define calculate tip.
I think you left the anti-views in that last path.
Ah, thank you. So we always receive a request. And well, our template's ready, return render to the request that came for it. And we want to use tip input.html, which should be a string. Tip input.html. File names are almost always strings. And in this case, well, we don't need a dictionary, right? There's nothing dynamic on this page. There was that title tag, that's why I went ahead and took that out of there. So we don't need a dictionary coming, we don't need to send any data to this page, it's just the form. This is where our data comes from. So we'll save that. And we need to add it to our home page. So here's the tip calculator. And that should be on calculate. And it's Django, not Flask, so we don't have to cancel and restart our server. Oh, wait, that's right. During the break, we did other stuff, so we did cancel the server. So I have to go restart the server. We don't have to do it all in one setting. We can even in a virtual environment, we can shut down the virtual environment servers and the virtual environment, all that, and come back to it later. It doesn't have to be done in one setting. We'll go into tip API. Oops. Tip API. And there's the manage.py. So have the Python interpreter look at the manage.py script and call the run server function. No error messages, so it should be good. Come over, reload, there we go. And we go to the tip calculator. We got a nice little form in there. We didn't do the action or the method yet. The default method is going to be get. So, right, if it costs $12.34, the service was really lousy, and we calculate, we get that from the form. There's no action, so there's no place to send it for processing. But by the get method, we can see the data appear in the URL. Post method, we wouldn't see it there. The same data is sent with it, but it's a lot easier to debug when we can see it. And if it's something that needs to be secure, you can shut it off later. And notice those name attributes become the like variables. Then we do an assignment for the values and connect them with an ampersand. So in an API, you could type that together yourself.
You said that was a range between 5 and 30, was that right?
Yes. So I turned it down to 9. Right, go way up here. I wasn't all the way at the end, I put 31. If I come way down here, it's like that. And I've made floating point numbers work before, but for percentages, I just do integers because it's so sensitive for what a change of 0.01 is. It wants to do it logarithmic, not linearly. So when you're over at the small numbers, move it a lot to get the same change that a tiny change at the other end would make. It gets difficult to work with. But the query strings, those are useful for APIs. Flask simplified it so that you don't have to use APIs, and then others followed suit from what Flask did. But traditionally, we would just put the query string together as part of our API. That's how we ask for data. So there's our form. So we need to go process it. But one more thing. So we have our action equals that, and the action goes to the script that's going to process it on the server. We'll set that up here in just a second. And our method equals get. Usually get or post. There's others. Put, delete, request. Some servers have a couple more specifically. There's a bunch of them. If you're sending an image or an entire file at once, you will need to do it as a request. You have to use the request method, but otherwise it's probably going to be get or post. some file types you can send as post, but not as GIF. But usually large images, so pictures, videos, songs, those would need sent as with the request method. Our action is going to be the place we send it. So I'm going to call this let's go to display and see if that URL works. And go to display. When we get display, we'll go to views dot. I haven't made it yet. Display tip. Sounds like a good name for it. Oh, and I missed a comma there. I'll zoom in because I've already made a typos a couple times. Some of y'all have some good eyes catching those typos on some of those typos. Everything there is stuff we've seen before, right? See how those pieces of what we've seen fit together. So the forms from the SF153 class call the action, which the forms loaded as any page in Django, and then that action becomes another path that we can do and then call one of our views. Whoops. Define display tip. Getting in a request. And we know at the end, we're going to return a render object to the same request, and the template's already sitting there. So it's going to go into tip response. .html, and there's going to be a dictionary there eventually. We're going to build the dictionary here in a second. But last one was going to be blank, but this one we definitely have some dynamic data going into. And then right in here, we need to calculate what that tip's going to be. We have our parameters in the URL. We'll do some quick testing. Well, we know for one thing, we know our dictionary has a title. And in this case, that'll be tip today. Sounds like a good title. But that's already one thing that's in there. Or we want to keep this link back to the home page. That's why I copied and pasted that. And maybe before I'll do a H3 header. It says that seems like about tip amount today would be good. So there's where our results go. So everything we've done so far should look familiar, right? Anybody see anything brand new in what we just did for building this app? That's why the class where we're always so restricted for time is usually we do it. We just see those small pieces, and it's hard to find time to put them together. But hopefully, a couple examples scattered around will help you all see how those various pieces go together. Yep, that seems pretty about right. So what we need to do is we have some data coming from that page. So how do we get that? Well, I'll just go ahead and type it out. So we have that request. We're asking the server for something, right? The analogy of a server in a restaurant goes really, really well. The server client in a restaurant is the exact same thing as server client in machines. When your glass runs, when your beverage gets close to empty, right? You got a glass of sweet tea, and when there's very little tea left in there, just some ice cubes and lemon, your server is going to notice. You know, you have to maybe at most you might have to point at it if she's really if your server, if he or she is really busy, they'll see the glass and be like, oh, time to bring them more sweet tea, right? So some indication is needed of, or more communication is needed than just a simple the initial state. We're sending data. So to get that, well, we sent it by the get method. And it had the name attribute price in that attribute. From looking at that line right there, can you figure out what you would do if you wanted to send it with post or request or put or delete?
Change, when you just changed it to request.post.
Exactly. So the request is an object, so it has all of that stuff that's coming with it. And it we're in Python, so you might recognize that notation that in our case, get is a dictionary with those name values being the keys. What else do we have? Service equals request dot get the service value. Then we need, well, actually, I'm showing an error message. This is Python. Y'all have probably seen this at the error message a bunch of times. I already recognize what it is, but I want to show you where Django puts error messages. We never see that in the finished tutorials and textbooks. It shows the finished product and tells us to avoid error messages. I think I said it before. I like to actually throw the error messages to show you all what to do when you see them. It can be very, very useful. And here's kind of an important one. So tip amount is going to be price times service. The slider ends up on like 27%. Our tip's going to be 27% of the price. Not a complicated calculation there. I'll go ahead and finish this out then. So then tip amount, oops, as far as the key that the template's waiting on, how to put tip response. I think I meant to call that tip display and use the same name everywhere, but response. I didn't make a typo over here, did I? Oh, no, tip response. So that's waiting on something called tip amount. And it's going to be the Python variable tip amount. Only that's a floating point number. So floating point number is probably not going to cut it for us. We might want to do something like a format. Oh, not parentheses. Highlight. Then put the parentheses. Point to F, because we know we're talking about money here, right? So we don't want to just send that floating point number. We want to go ahead and format it as a string to print up there. We could send the number and it'll automatically convert it to a string because it's set to work. Django's set up to work that way. But our formatting options that we know are in over on the Python side. So we'll make sure and do that first. So now this error message, so this is going to crash, but we'll get to that in a second. Reload this. So maybe our meal was 23.45. Service was pretty good. We hit calculate, and here's what the error message looked like. Type error. Y'all have probably seen that a few times. A few of y'all probably spotted that I was making the type error before while I was doing that, right? Because look at, well, we'll see it down here. If we scroll down, well, you'll notice
I think it says it up at the top. It said can't multiply sequence times something.
we get a lot more information from Django than we get from the Python interpreter.
Sheesh.
So really, really, really great error messages. Here it is. So from get, variable price, 23.45. So there's the information. There's what's in our get, our post, our files, our cookies, our meta. All of these are things that can be sent. Oh, there's not even all the meta. Then afterwards, there's request or settings. I think both of those videos for the API, I said there's 4 things we can put in the method. Everything that's in a label in the left-hand column here on the error message is something we can put there. So we can send it via settings or meta, cookies, files, post, get, user. And there is a request one as well. So there's a lot of ways we can send stuff to the server. That was one thing I was not happy about with either one of those videos. They did not describe that server interaction correctly. Those people that both definitely knew what they were doing with the Python code. Neither one of them bothered to say they were doing some of their stuff machine specific. So if you're not on the Flash video, if you're not on a Mac, you can't really follow his instructions. And on the fast API, if you're not on I think he was using a Windows machine, right? Or was he on a Mac as well? Both of them did. I remember they both did device specific things. So they're not like cross platform. But then on Git, we can see the error, the problem, right? 2345, that's the right number. 24, that seems like the right number. But what about those other little symbols there around them? I think everybody knows what those mean, right? Yes.
Literal, you need an integer.
So a web address is always a string. It probably says that somewhere. I think you said something about it too.
It's right. Well, on the exception value up there, it says something.
Right here. Is that what you were looking at?
No, I was looking up top, but it's
Oh.
not the same thing.
Yeah, there's different places. The big one to remember is that it's a web address. It's always a string. So if you have a number in there, remember to cast it.
You said remember to do what?
To cast it,
Okay.
that's the verb that means change the type of it.
Data. Okay.
That's not right for service, so it's gonna be that. Oh, I'll do it this way, service divide equals 100. We do that with plus and minus all the time, but we haven't seen divide reassignment. We remember we do have that for all of our operators, not just the addition one that seems to be the only one that ever shows up sometimes. Take service equals service divided by 100 to get it to a decimal point, a percentage before we go calculating with it. That should be fixed. Oh, might as well throw this in here while we're doing error messages. Print price service. Just to show where this goes. So notice now there's a print statement. And I'll just reload it. Well, there we go. We got filled in our title and our thing here. We could switch to post after the debugging's done, but that print statement's not showing up anywhere, right? It's over on the server. So there's where the echoes go. If you throw in some echoes, if that's your process for debugging, start printing things out to figure out which line it actually crashed on. It shows up in the console. And then intermingles with all the echoes coming from Django itself. On February 15th, the Git stuff. So hopefully you don't have to look very hard to realize that should probably be logged, not to the console. So you can just redirect, there's a redirect, not too different. We'll see that soon. That was quite a few things already. Back to the home page. So our basic template. We saw that. Took a step further from the other day. And then a rather small application, but it did fit in our time constraints. Maybe it's a real $5 meal. Go someplace nice and it's 78.32, but it was a really nice place, so they were snobby to you and just rude as can be the whole time. So you can crank that down. I know I wouldn't do that. I only made it 9 days to server. And that was like one of the worst 9 days I ever had. I've been friends with the manager for a while, and he called me the other day. I called him and was like, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna do this anymore. And he's like, yeah, I understand. It's like, you're the only person I've ever seen walk out with virtually nothing. Like, I would get stiffed constantly and cussed out, and people would throw stuff at me. I was awful as a server. Like, everybody in that tumbleweed said they'd never seen anybody get stiffed as much as I had. I was a terrible server, and I didn't like it. But as a result of that, I did really, really well, because I know what's entailed in that job. It's a rough job.
That's okay. You're a great teacher.
Thank you. I really enjoy what I do these days. I usually tip up around closer to the 30% range. It's like, I remember exactly why I only made it 9 days as a server. That's a rough job, and it doesn't come with anything. Yeah, like a bunch of people were surprised that I actually, some of those 9 days, I fell back into that thing where there's automatic boost in the pay. Like, I made minimum wage, not $2.30 an hour, because I've made almost nothing in tips. Work a 9-hour shift and have like $3 in tips. They're like, no, that's not what I'm claiming. That's really what people left me today. Along with all the burns on my fingers and stuff. So, a small application, but do you see how the pieces go together? That's my recommendation for lifetime. One more link here when I address that. Yeah, I'll do this. I'm gonna go over to GitHub and in R1. So there it is, spring 2023. I'm going to grab the people class that we were using for the API, and the quickest way seems to be probably copy and paste. Copy. What am I gonna do? That is on the computer notes, so I'm going to make sure that's what I'm going to do. So bring that back over to Spider, make a new file, paste that in here, and save it as a people class here. Where did I put it when I was getting ready? I just put it right there at that level. So when somebody asked a question earlier, I noticed that there was a models tab that it goes in. I usually just do this right here. I'll put it at the same level as all the Python scripts. Unless there's a lot. But if there's just going to be a handful of classes, I'll just put them all in one file, one module. So then over in the views tab, where we would actually use that, can import that by the address. So this is the one that might not be intuitive. So we go from chips 8. Is that the name of it? No, from stuff dot people import person. So we need to go up to the folder it's in. So we have to actually ask for that folder specifically. This is the way I always do it. I noticed the Django Girls tutorial when somebody asked a question earlier, there was a models folder and it appeared that they put the classes in there. So maybe that's where they're supposed to go. But there's more than one way to do it. There's more than one way to make it work. So this is what I've always done. Just put it at the class at the same level. And then, well, that's an address, folder / file name. But we need the object-oriented version of the folder, not the address bar version of the file path. Bring in that object, and then we can create some simple data. Whoops. I was looking at the word from and just automatically typed it again. Townsfolk. That sounds like a good name. is going to be some list of persons. Person Sally, oh, I did Sally the other day. Mary is 42 from Marysville. Person Henry is like 12 from Henryville. What's something else? And Clark County. Person, I don't know, Bradley, who is 38 from Borden. That sounds good. There we go. There's some data. And instead of doing all of this, oh, whoops, put commas in there because that is a list. Surprised nobody pointed that one out to me. It is a comma separated list. I just did it on a couple lines. And instead of doing the API, that class has a default string. So I'm just going to send that back for the API example. You all know how to turn that into a dictionary, right? Or maybe make the dictionary, make your data the dictionary to begin with. Or put it in a relational database someplace else and just use it. But we could define simple API and take in a request, and then it's going to return well, we need to build it up. We can't use yield like we can in Flask. That's why I never tried it in Flask until the other day in class. Because in Python, it has to be one string that we return. So yield doesn't, generators don't work here. But the generators work fine in Flask. That was really nice. Simple API, so data starts as a blank string, and then for P in townsfolk, data concatenate reassignment with P plus a break tag. That way it looks nicely on there, and then we'll return data. So oversimplified, but that's basically what we're doing with the API, right? We have some data, sending it back when we give any URL. So we can make, oh wait, that's not right. Return HTTP response. And in that response, include the data. There's more than a string necessary to send it across the internet. So if we go to URLs, and add another one in here, path, people, oh, contacts. That's a good one. Views dot, I already forgot what I called it. Simple API. So again, stuff we've seen before. A different way to use these tools. And the reason I wanted to do something with the API is just to make sure it's clear that API is a method by which we do things. API is not the API is not specific to those libraries we looked at. Application programming interfaces means we're sending data across the internet. By a URL request will be made for specific data, and we're going to respond to it. So there's lots of ways we can reply to that. Where was it going? Oh, here. And then in this API, and this link needs to go to contacts. Uh-oh. Oh. Same error as before. We need to actually cast person into a string in order to send it back. I guess I could have just waited until the thing hit natural. And then it's the default representation we've set up last week or whatever day that was, but still sending that data back via a URL request. So it wouldn't take much to add some special characters into that URL that you would know to look for to bring parameters around and things like that. Or passing query strings is probably the easiest one. Instead of the angle brackets or curly braces like Flask or Fast API used, you'd probably want to do it as like type in a query string. Set up a form so that it built a query string. So like name equals Mary, and it would look for that. But remember, the same thing would still apply. The URLs are not case sensitive, so it would ignore the capital M, and then it wouldn't match Mary in the database. So that's an easy thing to fix up. But you would set up something so that you would get that from a form and filter through the contact list. Probably for the API, but back to the home page. All that makes sense. Things we've seen before, combined in a different way. Hopefully it's nothing new for anybody. I would recommend doing something that way. Does everybody have sort of a fallback application they go to? Like when they're learning something new, software that they've made multiple times, they go to learn a new language. Like,
I like W3 schools. Is that what you mean?
oh, I'm in an actual application that you've made.
Oh,
For example, my fallback is Space Invaders. The classic
you made
video,
Space Invaders?
go back and forth, get lower, shoot them down. That's what I use to learn a new language. Every language I've learned that, well, not every language, because that didn't start till probably 2013 or so. But every language I've learned since 2013, that's the first thing I do is I sit down and make Space Invaders. And I don't have to think about the logic at all. I've made Space Invaders a lot of times over the years. I know that logic in and out. Do you have some software like that you know really well?
I guess mine will be the ATM, but I have to get it right, but it will be, if that's what you mean.
Practice stuff. Yeah, if you don't have something like that, you might want to start looking for something. But take something you know. Do you have some applications? That's one thing I wasn't happy with the homework in this class, and I'll probably redo it before I run it on campus again. On the IB Online, I can't change it, but most of the programming classes, they give problems, right? They'll say like do a list and capitalize one word. That's not a programming assignment. A programming assignment is like you're contacted by somebody named Debbie who's starting a business and needs this to happen. And that's what we usually see in programming books, right? So in the future, I'm probably going to work more of those back into this course in the classroom. But those sort of things, programs you've written before. Small things you've done, probably interest calculators. That's a common one, right? The one you always see in math class too, because it's the ultimate practice of order of operations, compounding interest. We really have to focus on order of operations for doing that. So it's great practice, and we see it in all kinds of math classes and programming classes. Something like that. Make some of those. Choose a small app that you know how to make. It could be something you already made. You'll need to turn it into functions and turn that into a Django app. That's the next thing I'm going to recommend. So we finish up here. We're going to host our stuff on pythonanywhere.com. You get one for free, and you can do multiple apps through one Django application. So that can extend. Where's login? Login. I already have an account, so I'm going to log in. So there's a console you can look at here. And in the Django Girls tutorial, they do it through continuous integration. You update the code on GitHub, and then you just, this is linked to GitHub, and when you change it there, it changes here. But that's something you can do later. That doesn't need to be done at the introduction to Django. Over here on the files button, you'll notice there is an upload button. So that's my first recommendation, is do it on your computer like we've done so far, and use the upload button here. There is also, I'll do it for Bash RC. There is also an editor right here. So you can also just make all the files right here. You don't even have to do anything specific. Go through it, save, all that stuff.
You have to upload each file separately, or can you upload a zip file?
The zip file and unzip it in the console. So zip the folder, upload the zip file, and then open a bash console. Open a bash console, and the command is just unzip to do that. There are better commands, but unzip will work. So if you don't know the better commands, you can use that. Exit doesn't close that, so how do I get back out of here? I think I click this. Oh yeah, the snake icon is, the snake looking thing is your home button. You'll see that everywhere. Over on web, there's also add a new web app. So let's look at files. I just went through and deleted all sorts of stuff. Oh, I missed that one, but I deleted a whole bunch of stuff. Got back to just the basic version. So I go to webs and add a new web app. Need to come up with a name for it. Your web app, your account doesn't support domain names, so your Python Anywhere app will be. So they tell me what the app's going to be. It's going to be my username .pythonanywhere.com. If you pay for it, you can do it, but use the free one. To pay for it, you'd be much better off to spin up a simple Linux server, like a Mintu on AWS or GCP or Azure, the smallest size they make, and then go into the terminal on it and say, pip install Django. Django admin start project, and then you're good to go. Right? Just do what we did in our console on a Linux server at AWS, and you'll probably get that for be able to run that for less than $10 a month. Which is a much better price than they have here. But the free one is good. And the free one will work for us. So we don't get to choose a name. So our options are to hit next. We want Django. They don't have 3.11. So we're going to have to back off a little. I'll go to 3.9. I'll say in class. And notice where it's putting it in the directory. So there's home /C_Francis4 /in class is where those files are going to be. Next. So when the Django girls start telling you how to do the continuous integration from GitHub, just skip that and come use the upload button here, or use the text editor here. It's definitely my recommendation. So it's creating, shouldn't take too long. Hopefully it won't take too long. Because on this left is for it to create, and for me to show you where to copy and paste the address so you can open it in your browser. Oh, there we go. So there's a reload button. Make sure you reload it every time you make a change, because that's not really reload like you think of it on a page. That's reload as in push the latest version. So until you click that button, you'll go in and make some edits in your Python scripts. But anybody that goes to the browser to look at the page is still seeing the old version. They're still seeing the last version. So that's push out the latest version. Reload is not a good label for that one, but I guess it is a reload. I would have put something about pushing out the latest, something about pushing the latest version there. You see the site, go ahead and do that. I haven't really made any changes. It's still Happy to host your website, keep it free for as long as you want to keep it, but you'll need to at least log in once every 3 months and click run. It stops running after 3 months. If I'm remembering correctly, they send you an email. So you don't have to do that. There's a run button in an email. They send you an email to remind you. This month, see all this stuff. There's where the source code is. So I go back to files. See now there's that in class one. That's where I'm going to put all of our stuff. We really only get one here, but we can put lots of stuff in one Django project. There's the manage.py file, and we create our apps and stuff the same way. We go into console, open a bash console, and create the apps just like we did in a PowerShell terminal earlier. Then on web, here's the site itself. So it's a CFrancis for Python anywhere. Right now, it's the default Django thing. So you could upload those files from this evening. That would work. Go back. Let's go to files. I think that would work. Let's see. Delete. Ship API. I don't think I have any special names, so let me see if I can upload a folder. Okay, gotta be a file. So I'll go into in class. Oh, maybe I can upload both of them. So let me go. So it's like this is what I had. So I'm going to put everything from in there. Oh, it's not going to work because I need to manage.py. So I need these two. I'll just zip them real quick. Compress to a zip folder. Compress to a zip file. And in class, here's all the settings and stuff. So I do need to replace that settings, or I can come in here and change it. And you go back up one level. So here is where I'll upload. I guess I can't upload both of them because I gave it a different name. If I would have called it the same thing, tip API, I could upload the other folder. But I can upload the forms. Oh boy, where was I going? This one. Upload stuff. And then from a console.
This where you unzip it.
Yes. So go into the in class folder and unzip stuff.zip. And then remove stuff.zip. So that's what you would do. There's an even easier way too, though. Clear remove -r stuff. So now I'm back to the original one. And remember how we created that? Python manage.py start app stuff. And now it's created correctly. So that would be my recommendation is you can upload stuff, but if you go in, just create it here. That is what I think is definitely the easiest. And then after it's done, then you can go through and push it out. I guess I could go through the process or now that that folder's there, we can upload individually the files we need. Because how many do we need? Those templates, views, urls.py, and then the project settings and URLs. It's only 5 files to upload. Might as well generate everything else here and upload those few things we changed, or just edit them there. And when you're ready, you can come over to web, push out the new version, load the site.
Do to push out the new version, you just push that reload thing?
Yes.
Okay.
And I didn't put anything in the URLs, but we saw that message before, right? It looked at the admin like, okay, there's no, y'all know what to do for the URLs. We've seen that twice and in the homework that was due the other day. But from here on out, most of the homework's going to be on the pythonanywhere.com. I highly recommend just using the editors on there, the editor and console on there. It's so much easier. And you can do the continuous integration, continuous deployment later. Or there's like 3 different things that the D stands for. I always think deployment, that seems to make the most sense. Make the changes on GitHub, and then this loads your page from GitHub every time. But you can learn to do that. You can work that in later. Get the
Did
basics
the
out.
editor have Lexing capability? I think it did.
Yes. Look, and then you'll notice the name's Python Anywhere, so it definitely knows Python.
Okay.
Oh, that's another one I wanted. In class. Oops. Wrong link. In class. In class URLs. That stuff needs to be include. Yeah, you saw all that. Not the greatest Lexing, but there is some. Close without saving. I think y'all know what to do from there then, right? That's a different text editor and terminal to do it in. But then you don't need virtual environments. Just develop it on the server. That is by far the easiest way to do it. Would be my recommendation. And then the web tab is the one that has your link, the push out button, and you will sometimes see if error messages pop. Error logs are right there. So you have a link to the error logs. But they also show up in your console. So, different places to look at it. It's set up specifically for Django and those sort of things. We had to choose Django from a list of options, but now everything here is built for Django. So much easier to do it that way. We leave out all the complicated steps because that tutorial wasn't really designed for anything that would be introduced in Python. It was designed for people that already are well adept at Python. And I know last summer it was overwhelming everybody. It was confusing them quite bad. And I kept making videos. I'm like, okay, forget that tutorial. Do this. And then I put that in all the videos. I'm like, okay, maybe make a little customization to this so I can tell you understand it and not just copying what I said in the video, and turn that in for your homework instead, because it was just overwhelming. It worked out pretty well by the end, but it was a lot all at once, as some of y'all probably noticed with last week's homework assignment, right? It is not made for introducing Python. It is made for thorough study of Django for people that already know a whole lot about Python. Otherwise, anybody have any questions about that? So that leaves us 1 hour and 10 minutes of our class time. As always, I will be sitting around in my office waiting for messages to questions to come my way until our scheduled time ends. Otherwise, I will see you all next week. Have a great weekend. I think today was going to be the only really nice day weather-wise, right? Well, if there's any more nice weather, enjoy the nice weather. but it is still February, so I'll see y'all next week.
Thanks, Chris.